You ever seen one of those videos where they're like, what if Mario was in Silent Hill? You see all these creepy Mario characters and mushrooms and stuff? That's what this feels like. Like someone took the normal and happy things from childhood and made them terrifying. And it's just really effective at that. This is horror. The rain isn't wet anymore. It's about a guy named Paul who goes to live with his sister because his parents died in a car accident. And on the way there, he stops by a grocery store to pick up some food because he has uneaten in 2 days. So he grabs a bunch of stuff, including some Pop-Tarts, which were his favorite as a kid, and he heads home. Except when he gets home, something's not right. Like, for one thing, the rain outside sounds like screams. But even worse than that, the rain isn't wet anymore. When Paul steps out of his car and walks into the yard, raindrops land on him and just sit there. They don't roll off his skin. They don't evaporate. They just kind of stay. And it's disturbing as hell. Then he goes inside and the first thing he sees is this painting on the wall that was on there before. It's a self-portrait of his dad that he drew when he was a kid. And then he finds his little sister in her room, and she doesn't seem to recognize him. She asks him if he's a friend of the family and if he brought her a present. Paul says no, but maybe you should ask the man in the basement. And she says, "Who are you?" and runs away. So Paul figures his sister's just acting weird, and he goes down to the basement to check on the URA man in the basement, who turns out to be his actual brother, Dennis. His brother's pretty much catatonic, barely moving or speaking, staring blankly ahead, except every once in a while he'll do this weird laugh, kind of like Squidward actually, and it's super unsettling. But after a bit, Dennis tells Paul that their sister isn't right in the head. She hasn't been since their folks died, and Paul wants to help her. So Dennis hands him a gun, says if she comes downstairs, Paul has to shoot her. And before too long, she does come downstairs. She asks Dennis for medicine, but he ignores her and she gets upset. She starts throwing stuff around, knocking over a chair, and then she pulls out a knife and lunges at Dennis, and Paul shoots her. He tries to resuscitate her, but she's already gone, and then he calls the cops and tells them what happened. But when they arrive, he's already surrounded by those dry, crispy little pebbles again, and his sister's body has vanished. The only evidence that she was ever there at all is a single drop of blood on the floor. And that's the end of the first episode. I'm sorry if that was a little longer than you were expecting, but I just couldn't resist. We've got 12 more episodes to go. We next see Paul 3 years later. He's now living in a cabin in the woods and working as a writer, trying to make something of himself. But even though he's alone, he still hears his sister's laughter sometimes. Sometimes he also sees these kids playing outside his window and he swears that they never the same 2 kids twice. They always have different clothes on. One day he hears a knock at the door and opens it to find a woman standing there holding a teddy bear. She asks if this belongs to anyone, but Paul doesn't recognize it. He tries to close the door, but she reaches out and sticks her hand in his face. Ouch. Her palm is filled with flesh-eating bugs that immediately latch onto Paul and start biting him. He slams the door and blocks them out with a chair, but when he looks at his arm, he sees a nasty bite mark and those same bugs crawling up his skin. He kills them with fire, but then the doorbell rings again. When he answers, it's the woman again. She introduces herself as Grace and says she's looking for her daughter. Paul tells her he saw the girl earlier, but she seems disappointed and says, "I know you did." Then she invites herself in. She says she's staying the night, and Paul goes along with it. But when he wakes up the next morning, she's gone. And again, the only evidence she was ever there is a single drop of blood on the floor. Of course, Paul is freaked out. So he leaves town, travels around for a bit, stays at a hotel. And one night he wakes up to what he thinks is his sister's laughter. But then he realizes it's actually the TV. It's coming from the TV. He turns it on, and it is tuned to some local news channel talking about how they're the serial killer in town. The Crimson King who preys on young women, leaving behind a single drop of blood at each crime scene. Paul gets scared, changes the channel, but every channel is talking about the same thing. This guy is a monster. So Paul leaves town again, hitchhikes to Chicago, thinking maybe he'll be safe in a big city. But on the train, he meets this couple, Peter and Mary, and they invite him to go camping with them. He accepts, because maybe he can finally escape all this crazy stuff. But when he's setting up camp, he sees those same kids playing in the trees. Then he sees a boy fall out of the tree and get impaled on a stick. And when Paul rushes over to help him, the boy disappears. That's when Mary comes over and says, "You didn't think we were really going camping, did you?" She said, camping. Then Peter says, it's time to come home, and grabs Paul's hand. They're in a car driving down a road lined with trees. Paul tries to get out, but Peter won't let him. He says he has to take care of his nephew now, and Paul screams for Mary to save him. She's not there. She never was. Peter never had a wife. The whole time, Paul was just another one of Peter's victims, another kid for him to add to his collection, like the ones he's keeping locked up in his basement. Oh, man. Well, that was certainly a detour. Let's recap what happened today. The man who killed his own sister because she was mentally unwell and dangerous is now being haunted by her ghost. He's being stalked by a serial killer and is now apparently part of a terrifying cult. Is he going to get out of this one? Horror. The Rain Isn't Wet Anymore is a horror anthology series written by Adam Neville, who is the master of building suspense. If you haven't heard of him before, his novella House of Leaves is one of my all-time favorite scary stories. The show doesn't have a lot of jump scares. It's more psychological, creeping into your brain and making you feel uneasy. Also, everything is incredibly well acted. Now, the production quality of the show isn't amazing, but it's shot like a movie, not like most other web series. And the soundtrack is good. You can tell they put a lot of thought into it. It adds a lot to the overall experience. And the story is really compelling. Even when it takes a turn into slasher territory, you're still invested in the characters. So I really recommend checking this out. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.